Hello everyone and welcome to the first edition of the Top 6 show of the new season. My name is Stewart. I am your new host for the season. We have got back outside into the real world. I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Gareth, Roberts and Harrison Worden here. We are going to do it the same format as last year, so we're going to split it into two sets. And first of all, we're going to deal with the top set, which is Chelsea and the two Manchester clubs, Man City and Man United, obviously. Gareth, we should probably start with Chelsea, seeing as it's easiest to make the comparison. We've got exactly the same record. They were literally the last team we played.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to be falling over themselves to tell us all how great they are. But yes, they did have one half of a game where they only could defend, but they didn't look like they were miles ahead as title favourites to me. Did
No,
they
they didn't blow us away in the first half when they had 11 on the pitch, did they? You know what I mean? And I think it sort of got lost because everyone talked about the penalty and then everyone talked about the rear guard action, if you like, against our 11 men. You know, that they went 1-0 up by, I still would say, I would argue, a fortuitous goal. Like, okay, it's clever to loop the header, but you're just sort of chancing your arm, aren't you? You're not going, bang, it's top in. You're just going, oh, well, I'll see where that goes. And then it happens to loop perfectly over Alisson. So I'm not having that, for one. And then we equalised, and we were, and we equalised. There's no controversy whatsoever about the penalty. It's a fucking penalty. But also we hit the bar. There's a scramble. We're causing the problem. So, and those first few minutes as well, where we were into them, we were at them. They were struggling with that. So, the idea that they're on a different level to us or something, I'm just not having that. Equally though, I think you've got to take the Liverpool hat off for a second and say, it's impressive what Tuchel's done, why he's been there, and the defeats that they had at the back end of last season in the league, the priorities were elsewhere really. By I think it was Arsenal, was it Villa as well? I think they lost to
Leicester.
And it's sort of like, I'm not saying you don't count them, but equally when they've needed to work to win, they generally win. So they are impressive. Everyone's fallen over themselves about Lukaku as well. And look, he is a good player, there's no two ways about that. And he does add something new to their squad. So they're going to be up there, no two ways about that. But they're not unbeatable, they're not unbelievable. They're not like on another level to us or to City. They're just adding a bit of spice in that they are another team capable of.
Yeah, and teams are allowed to get better. I think that's fair to say. Harrison, for me, I think it's a little bit like when people always put their predictions at the start of the season, you always want to have the headline, the hook, and people saying Man City are probably going to be up there. That's not exciting. People know that. People saying Liverpool is going to be up there, I think it's the same. Even though people aren't, I think if you were to say that, people would be like, yeah, well, I can see why. Chelsea on the rise. Chelsea is the sexy new name. Yeah. So that's the one that always ends up being the headline. Consequently, all we see is that person saying Chelsea, that person saying Chelsea, that person saying Chelsea. Even if they're only saying, I've got a sneaking suspicion for Chelsea, suddenly everybody's talking about them.
They're a good side though, aren't they? I think with Chelsea, I think they'll take more points off the top teams than they do bottom teams with the way they set up. See, like I think the way they set up, they can go and get a point at the Etihad and then maybe go and beat them at Stamford Bridge, and they'll look to do the same against us, won't they? I think we looked better against Chelsea, against 11 men, and I felt we looked more like scoring when they counter-attacked us with 10 men, and then we went back to counter-attack them again. And I think that's the way teams are going to play against Chelsea, the lower teams. So like they're set up unbelievably defensively, aren't they? They've got players in attack who press unbelievably well, like Mount and that as well. But I think against teams who sit back, it's going to be interesting to see how they break them down. I think they'll beat more than not. But I mean, you can't afford to drop 4 or 5 in different games against the lower teams, can you? If you're going to go for the title against Liverpool and City. So against the small teams, I think that's going to be Chelsea's test. I think they'll always do well against the big teams the way they set up, because they're hard to break down. Do you know what I mean? Especially if they go 1-0 up, they're like that, aren't they? They'll sit back. And so it's the lesser teams that I'm interested against. And teams like Wolves, we've seen Wolves against United. Wolves have battered United, by the way. We've absolutely battered them. So we'll get to United in a minute. United's a different story. But games like that where they've got to go to the Molineux, dictate the ball, but against a side who are going to hit them on the break with pace and quality. So I think that's the test for Chelsea, to see if they can handle going and win them games on a Friday night, like when we've been to Wolves on a Friday night, a Thursday night, and was it a Monday night, was it? And we went there and won. City, obviously they dropped points once there, but I mean, they go and win them games. So Chelsea have now got proof that they can go win them games where the fans are up against them as well. So, like I said, I think in the big games they'll be fine, but it's the games like Wolves away on a Friday night where they've got to go out and win.
And it's funny because we forget that these are London teams, and when they are playing against their London rivals, it's a different feeling for them.
Yeah.
Like them going to Selhurst Park probably fills them a little bit more dread than when we do it, for example. And these, like Harrison says, these are the tests that we are going to find out whether they can stay the course. But I suppose Tuchel's main counter argument is that's why we brought Lukaku in.
Yeah.
He is for those people. I mean, there was a lot made about his battle with Van Dijk and Matip. I always knew that was going to be a sideshow. It wasn't really going to be the game. But there are other players in the league for whom he is going to be formidable. He is going to be a psychological barrier to beat as well as a physical one on the pitch.
Yeah, look, he's going to score goals, isn't he? There's no two ways about that. You back him to get, 20 plus probably this season. So for as much as we want to talk it down because we're Liverpool fans, it's one of them where you've got to hold your hands up and say, look, they've got loads of money, they've spent loads of money, they've got a good manager, they've got a good striker, they've got a good spine to the team, they've got good backup. I'm really talking myself into them now, and I don't like it. Do you know what I mean? Look, they're going to be up there, as I say, and I think Harrison's right in that it could the league could come down to head-to-heads.
Yeah.
Do you know, because I think Liverpool have got much better at beating the type of sides that Harrison's on about, where they just sit in and they're waiting for you to do something. Obviously, people might say that's why they wanted one more in the transfer window to make sure of that situation. But that's a struggle for everyone. That's a struggle for City. That's a struggle for Chelsea. So and it's definitely a struggle for Man United. I mean, Man United, I know we're going to come on to them, but their away record, I know it seems mad to say, it just seems that spawn.
How have they done that?
It's wild.
They haven't dominated. Yeah, we will go on to them in a bit.
Sorry.
But yeah, I know you all itching to get into them, but don't worry.
But just on Chelsea, who never came on, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi, Pulisic, do you know what I mean? They never played a minute at Anfield.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It's keeping everyone happy though.
But this is what I was going to go on to, Harrison, is the fact that there is a flip side. Because if you look at it from the perspective of a fan of both teams, if you're one of those fans who puts all of your stock in the transfer market, you look at what Chelsea and think they've got everything that we wanted. They've got 2 players for every position. They've got quality internationals throughout the side. But they've got loads of them kicking around.
Yeah.
And who aren't going to get games. And obviously when Tuchel was new last season, he was able to rotate a little bit under the guise of, I'm going to see how you are, or see what you can do. Damn it, I wanted a sandwich. But now, the new season, when he makes those decisions, he's going to want his main guys. And so there's going to be a lot of players on the bench who aren't going to be in with a shout. And the next World Cup isn't that far away. You can see it turning into a situation where there's factions in the dressing room.
They've already had the scrap behind the scenes, haven't they? Last season.
Exactly. So these are sometimes when Klopp goes on about his small squads, we're all just like, suck it up, lad. I mean, how can having more world-class footballers be a problem? But it can't it?
Yeah, it can. You look at the way Chelsea play, whatever way you want to call it, let's say it's a 3-4-3. Lukaku's going to be the main man, isn't he? So you've only got two players behind him, and you've got 6 or 7 players who can all play in that position. And look, it's a long season, and you never know what happens. They might get the treatment that we had with injuries left, right, and centre. So then that's where the squad comes into play. You can't say for certain, can you? But it can happen, can't it? Do you know what I mean? You look at it and you say, Werner's another one who never even got on the pitch. Is he going to get minutes over Lukaku, or is he going to play in that role? But then Mount's arguably your best player. Do you know what I mean? It's how do you balance it? But then you look at it, Kante got a little injury at Anfield, didn't he? And what he went out, go and do 2 days later, they unsigned Saul. Do you know what I mean? They've got the ability to do that. I think it does look from the outside looking in that Tuchel's got the respect of them, where everyone knows the job role and everyone knows that they've got a part to play. Do you know what I mean? And do you know what? Like, I think to fit them all in, they might change system at times. I've never seen them do that under Tuchel just yet, but they might change system to accommodate another attacker for another midfielder. Cause you'd say, obviously, if Kante's injured, they've only got Jorginho, Kovacic, and now Saul. So they might play 2, sit in and create another, take a wing back out or something, and go to a back 4 and add another attacker in. They've got the players and the option to do that, but it's how they balance it, isn't it? We've been lucky at Liverpool where we have balanced it well, but then we haven't got as big a squad attacking-wise that Chelsea have. Do you know what I mean? So, like,
there's the pressure as well, isn't there?
Is.
In that, you spend all that money, you bring that manager in, you buy all those stars, you're expected to win every single week, every week. And like, we've seen it with Liverpool, that Liverpool have drawn with Chelsea, and there's people losing the shit about it. Drawn with Chelsea, and it's like, but it was 10 men and we should have won and blah blah blah. Like, Chelsea will have that as well. Chelsea, and like, are they used to that? Is this group used to that? Can this group take it? Because they obviously had the spell under Lampard, but no one from the outside, I think, really expected Lampard to be up to the job.
Not long term, no.
Exactly. Whereas this fella's got the experience. He's a bit of an hard bastard. You know, you can tell he takes no shit behind the scenes. But it's dead interesting to see how that works with the egos. And if there is a fallout behind the scenes and they lose 1 or 2 or even draw 1 or 2 when they're expected to win, what's that like when the media starts to pile on, the fans start to pile on, they can feel that when they're going out there psychologically. Oh, that'll be dead interesting to watch.
One thing that's going to be very hard if you're Tuchel and you've got one of the guys who you think is your mainstays and he's underperforming, and he's underperforming maybe 2-3 games in a row, and you've got that array of stars on the bench, and everyone's saying, why are they not playing?
Every week as well.
Yeah.
That pressures.
Exactly. It's really easy to build up. And another thing that's going to ramp up the pressure is obviously European campaigns starting just after the international break. They've got, I would say, not necessarily a taxing group. I think obviously Juventus are still in transition and not the strongest Juventus have ever been. It's the same with Zenit St. Petersburg.
The travel, isn't it, though, Zenit?
It's the travel. But within those first 2 games, they do also have games against Spurs and Man City. So it is going to be interesting to see whether or not he maybe tries to cut some corners with some of those teams in the Champions League, particularly away in Russia. I don't know what you think, Robbo. Do you think he's going to be able to give everyone a go?
Yeah, Harrison's already said, hasn't he, about the number of options they've got. It's ridiculous, and I think that's adding to the angst of some Liverpool fans, isn't it? Because we're comparing it directly to them. Whereas, as we've already said, it's different managers, different styles, different clubs, and even different expectations around the number of players you're going to have to work with. But yeah, he's going to use some of that squad undoubtedly, and you know, you'd expect them to beat Zenit, obviously, Juventus maybe a bit more tougher, Malmo absolute so you know, they're going to get out the group, aren't they? Unlikely as well, they're going to end up with a dead rubber in the group, as is always the way when you're by far the strongest team in it. So they'll have plenty of opportunity to play some of them lads Harrison's going on about, even as well, you know, maybe to mess with formations, like, you know, you say you haven't seen him accommodate extra attacking players. If you're ever going to do that, it's Malmo, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, unlucky Malmo, you might well be the guinea pigs there. All right, well, we've given Chelsea enough of a buff. It's time to move on to Man City. Now they have been traditionally our biggest challengers for the last 2 or 3 years, and what I've seen from the start of the season, Harrison tells me they're going to be again. The talk was dominated by who they didn't get in the transfer market coming into the season. Obviously, they tried to get a striker. Guardiola's been very coy about what he does or doesn't want or can or can't spend and all other bollocks. But the reality is that we all know he can't let someone like Aguero come out of the building without replacing him, and yet that's where they are.
That's where they are, but they have accommodated with that Ferran Torres now going up front, and he's scoring goals. But the thing with City is, we spoke about it before, haven't we, Mo, where they always score goals. Scoring goals is never an issue for City. They'll score 3 or 4 every other week past teams. We've seen it against who they scored in Arsenal, and who's the other one that they scored 5 in?
Norwich.
Norwich, wasn't it? That's 3 o'clock kickoff. 3 o'clock kickoff at the Etihad. It's 5 minimum minute.
Which makes it even more mad when they can't pack the place out, but that's a whole other story.
That's another story. But that's what City do. They've moved Jesus out now to the right wing as well, haven't they? And he's going to score goals from the wing. Depends what they do with Mahrez as well. But Jesus is a goal scoring winger. Sterling's going to score goals out wide. Grealish will create. And City's issue for me has never been goals. It's always been, right now you're looking at a left back situation or even a over centre half. I don't think they're great at the back. I think they can still get at City, and they're always going to dominate the ball. 9 times out of 10 they're going to have more possession. So it's always going to be the other side where can they handle the counter attacks. City will be up there. They've proved, as with Liverpool, that they can go and win 9 or 10 on the bounce. And that's the thing with Chelsea that we have to go and see, like, can they go and do it? Do you know what I mean? When the legs are tired and that as well, when it's their game in 6 days, Liverpool and City go out and win it. And it's not, can Chelsea do it? But yeah, I think City will be there or thereabouts no matter what. But it's interesting what he's going to do with long term, because that Torres playing up front, has he ever had a run of games where he's played up there more than 2 or 3 times?
I don't think so.
I don't think he has.
No, maybe this isn't going to be his chance though, because I think you're right to kind of focus on him and particularly on Jesus as well, Gareth, because a lot of the talk from Guardiola has been how good Jesus has been, how pleased he is with him, how well he's adapted to his new role, which tells me he's basically had to convince him to do it because he didn't really want him to do it, and he's trying to big him up to do it. But are they going to be able to get everything you need from a forward from having him there and Torres in the middle? I mean, Torres does run channels in a way that your normal forward would, but he's not going to be winning any balls in the air, is he? He's not necessarily going to be that physical presence who can occupy two centre halves. So
it's that extra special stuff as well that an out-and-out striker does. You know what I mean? Like pulling a goal out from nowhere on a frustrating day and things like that. I'd be backing him less than someone like Harry Kane. You know, there's a reason they were going in for him. There was a reason they were putting that money down for him. They didn't get him. I would say as well, by the way, that we've still got January. You know what I mean? Like for all this like idea, oh yeah, that's all over now and he's staying. Is he though? Because you know they just need to come back in again in January. Kane just needs to kick up a fuss again then, and then we're back to square one and the circus starts again. So I don't think it's gone away that they want a striker. They've got January to go and try and get one. Be very surprised if they didn't go and do that. And then in the meantime, well, what happens? And look, they've already dropped points. Obviously got beat by Spurs. Community Shield, okay, not really the first team if you like, and you can say it's a throwaway game, but they lost it anyway. They lost the Champions League final. So I'm hoping, praying. I get the common sense thing to do is say they'll be right up there and they'll be brilliant, and they've got every chance of winning the thing. I like to see it as cracks. I'm like Gary Neville's doing about Liverpool.
I don't think City will win it, but I think plus 85 points. I think in that respect they'll get 85 points.
Yeah. Well, I like this idea. I'm leaning into. Let's start tapping into some of those cracks.
It's Leicester for them next.
Well, yeah,
which is a tougher game for them.
I mean, their schedule generally is quite hard. I mean, I can't think it's towards the end of September. They've got Chelsea, PSG, then Liverpool in 1 week.
Is it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether or not it's one of those situations where Liverpool are better off going last because they've been punched out, or whether they'll be sharpened by those two
it's at
games.
Anfield, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right, to be fair. Okay, so I think the thing as well, we talk about Chelsea and having an illustrious squad. City are talked in the same bracket, but there are players for whom, were they to lose them, there would be a massive problem. Obviously, we talked about the fact there is still a hole at number 9. Rodri has become very important to this team. He's one of those guys who plays every week, and I think Fernandinho is still able to go in and do a job occasionally, but the age he's at now, I think if Rodri was unavailable for a long while, they would definitely miss him. Still obviously question marks around the goalkeeper. And Harrison, you're right, I think the centre-halves, there's still something going on there, because Laporte has played.
Stones
ever. I'm never.
There is that. He's one of those guys who you can look at him play well for 20 games in a row and still go into the 21st thinking, he might dunk one.
They've had a long summer as well in the Euros. That can go against them. Do you know what I mean? The intensity, and especially with it being in London and England, the Euro final, Wembley, the intensity. I know they try and say how good the Euros was, which obviously, to be fair to England, they get to the final, but I mean the intensity that they've had in that Euros, the pressure that they've had on them, then to come have a 3-week break and come back into the season. See, like we said with Stones, there's always something there. You'll never quite be convinced, will you?
And then City are in the other situation where they can't really build a partnership. They've got Diaz. Yeah. They know he is going to be the cornerstone. But then they thought that about Laporte. And then Laporte kind of had a bit of a wobble, and now is kind of... It feels like an uneasy truce.
Yeah.
Like, they were willing to let him go. He wanted to leave, and yet he's still there. And he is in the team, but all it takes is one game where he's not picked for a big game where it feels like he should have. That attitude goes. And like Gareth said, January's not that far away. And as I've said earlier, this is a World Cup year. So all of these things are going to be rising to the surface. Players are going to be on the phone to agents saying, any chance, anyone who's looking at me, maybe I can get out of here and get some games. And when you're trying to build over a whole season, these things can start to fester in big squads. Some
people think it's clutching at straws, but it's not. It's the football world, isn't it?
We've seen it happen.
Yeah. Laporte was when we won the league, a lot of people were saying when Laporte got that injury, that was a huge blow to City and a huge reason we won the league. No, not us, it didn't ever affected us directly, but I mean it affected City, and that mental barrier, losing the best centre half, then a year later he's out the team. Do you know what I mean? He's come back and he's gone, he's vanished. That could never happen to Van Dijk. Look what Van Dijk's done. Do you know what I mean? It just shows that there's holes there, there's cracks there to be had, isn't there? And
Guardiola's leaving in 2023 as well.
Well, this is another one I was going to come on to. It's very interesting when we're thinking about the fact that they've still got potential business to do transfer-wise, when they're already having to start thinking about succession in that way. Are they going to start thinking, well, do we want to give Guardiola all this money? Are we going to need it for the next guy? Are we going to have to make some compromises here compared to what you want and what we think is right for the club?
It's a big shit cardigan to fill. Who comes after him? You know what I mean? It's a bit like Liverpool have got the same problem. When you have a manager with that standing, with that presence, and with that record, okay, he still hasn't won the Champions League with them. But that will be in people's heads.
Yeah.
You know, what do they do? Who's you go and get? And when do you start sounding them out? It's 2021 now. He's going in 2023, he's saying, and he wants to manage the national side. So when do you start sounding them out, and how do you do the succession plan? It's dead hard.
Yeah.
Dead hard in any field that, like any type of job. If there's a big figure who's central to a business and he's saying he wants to go, how do you sort that out? And what about when people know that he's going as well? Like if there's a bit of beef between a player and a manager, you're going anyway.
Exactly, I'm going to ask you. I'm not listening. And again, we talk about these things like they're flippant, but we've all heard conversations with footballers where they say exactly this.
I wouldn't be surprised if he signs a new 5-year deal on treble the wage that he's on now.
I mean, if he keeps blowing in the Champions League, then up to that.
Well, one thing that's interesting to think about is that it could have been Arteta, and probably would have been if it stayed put a little bit longer. But anyway, these are all things we'll have to wait and see about. It's time for the fun start. We're going to talk about Man United, and we're going to start at the point where no one else has started, which is the fact that, as Harrison earlier said, they got very lucky against Wolves, and this was a Wolves team that didn't cause Spurs masses of problems, don't necessarily look that prolific at the moment. I don't think they've actually scored yet this season.
Similar to Brighton last year, though, where they're creating chances and just not putting
them away. Got like a massive XG, haven't they? And they just keep blowing all their chances.
But what that does tell you is that Manchester United are certainly not as imperious as some would have you believe. And has their late splurge, we're going to call it that, I'm not going to reference it in any other way. Has that raised expectations to a point that they can't sustain them?
Oh yeah, 100%. Have you seen Sancho, Varane and Ronaldo's wage bills more than 14 or 13 Premier League teams?
Just those three?
Just those three.
Wow.
That's what you're dealing with. And I think it's interesting, it's how do they manage Ronaldo? Do you get what I mean? Like, they play, a 4-2-3-1, but I'd look, just been a little football in there, just looking at like heat maps and that, where he operates for Juve, and he's got a free roll, but he comes to the left a lot more. So how do they need him to be a central vocal point that Cavani is? Cavani just stays in and around with his movement, and eventually a chance comes. Ronaldo's not going to necessarily do that. He's going to float whatever he wants, and I think it could affect them in a worse way than it could do in a better way. I think he'll score goals. He'll score at least 15 to 20 goals. But I mean, the whole round play, and it's how do you manage that? How do you manage a player who's not necessarily a system? He's not going to be a system player. He's going to think he is the system. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But we've binned off Arsenal, haven't we, Mo? You know, we were talking about that before the camera starts rolling, saying you can't call them top six the shite. But one of the things we were talking when we were saying that was it's weird the way it feels like loads of different people are pulling in different directions, all under the hat of one club, but it doesn't feel very club. I think that happens at Man United.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like I was driving in there and they were talking about Van der Beek. You know, he could have gone to Everton, and Man United said no, and I was just kicking round like, you know, hang on, well, why didn't you let me go? And they had his agents on, and he was actually all right, and he was saying, well, you know, Donny's just got to prove to the manager that he deserves a chance, and when he gets it, take it, you know, stock line. But you know, you're right, Harrison, in like, you know, all these egos that are kicking round, all these experienced fellas who will want to play. How the fuck do you fit them all in? And meanwhile, you're playing Fred as your fella, like who's winning the ball for you in the middle of the park, or you're asking Pogba to do that, and like he doesn't want to do that, or you're asking McTominay to do that, who's all right, to be fair, but is he elite? Probably not. So it's like, I mean, there was that thing that everyone loved that did the rounds on social media, wasn't it? Where there's no midfield.
Yeah. Big old gap.
Loads of fellas up front and just no midfield. So maybe that's the plan.
I mean, it was so funny as well, because if you look at it, it's just like all of them are on the shoulder of the last defender trying to get in there, and it's like, Guys, you can't all do it.
But it's like them fellas in the playground at school, isn't it? Where, like, you know, someone would do all the work, take a couple of people on, have a shot, it wouldn't go in, and there'd just be a lad who would like going,
I've seen a funny one, yeah, and it's Delph in the City changing room, and he's shouting at all these players at City, and it's Maguire, and he's shouting at Varane and Ronaldo, like they're not going to listen to Harry Maguire, are they?
No, and this is another really good point, is that when it comes to the crunch in the season, when they're up against it, away from home, a goal down at half-time, we've all heard about their fantastic away record. Who's going to start laying into whom? And who's going to be able to sit there and take it?
The players are bigger than the manager.
Exactly. I mean, don't get me started on the manager. But I think...
I love a Solskjaer chat.
I know you do. To kind of drill down more into this, Harrison, I'm really intrigued about Gareth's idea about the fact that they seem to have so many different plans to jump. Because rumours are Man United looked at this deal and decided against it, and then only revives it when they realised that he was going to go to Man City. I mean, that's something that you shouldn't be doing in multi-million-pound businesses anyway.
They've done it before though, haven't they, Sanchez?
They have done it before, it's true. But
that worked out well.
No, yeah, I don't think it's the exact same.
But this one appears to be so extra counterproductive, because if you look at the forward line, they've already got a problem with too many guys and how they're going to arrange them, because you've got Martial still knocking around. Rashford's obviously out injured. He's going to come back at some point. But it appeared they had just worked out this whole Cavani-Greenwood little partnership, and they looked like they were going to be good for each other. You throw that Portuguese bomb into the mix, and everything starts looking weird
Greenwood's
again.
great as well.
Exactly.
It's such a short-term sign, isn't it? We know his age and all that, but how good's Greenwood going to be in 2 years' time? How much would he benefit playing 30 Premier League games as a striker?
Exactly that.
He's going to be at least 25 to 30 goal season player by the time he's 21, 22, and you're slowing down his development.
No one is talking about the fact that Mason Greenwood has scored in every Premier League game so far this season.
And looked
every single
good
game.
He's the man who looked at Wolves and you knew if there's someone going to bail them out, it was going to be Greenwood. Wasn't it?
It's like, can you imagine in '98 when we had Michael Owen coming through, if we'd have gone out and bought, I don't know, John Aldridge back from Spain or something and played him up front?
So don't worry about that, Michael. We know you're ready to play and score goals in the Premier League, but we're bringing this fella in. Oh, right, sound.
You can learn from him and train him, though.
It's just an odd thing to do, isn't it? And it feels like what I was trying to make the point before with the Beek was, you know, it's different parts of the same company doing different things. And there's no way Solskjaer signed Donny van der Beek.
No.
Because he doesn't fancy him.
He doesn't know what to do with him.
He doesn't know what to do with him. He doesn't fancy him. He doesn't play him. And that's why Everton come knocking and wanted to take them off his hands. Because he's not getting a sniff. And yet they paid, 50 million thereabouts for him. So it feels to me like the Emperor, you know, has looked at this Ferguson, do you know what I mean? Face appearing from a hood and just going, we must sign Ronaldo. And like Darth Vader's had to go and sign him, you know what I mean?
Clearly Darth Vader's not Ollie in this scenario.
Well, no.
No.
Woodward.
He's more, I think Ollie's, if he's anyone, he's Rick Moranis in Spaceballs.
He's not that hard.
No. But, I mean, they do have a big problem. We should talk about the midfield now, because it is extremely negligent for a club of that stature. I mean, they've heard everybody talking about this midfield, and it's been obvious. We haven't seen what they're going to do with Pogba. We don't know for sure whether this is his last season, whether they are looking to move him on.
Sounds like, doesn't it?
It does sound like it's his last season. It does sound like they're trying to move on from him, which makes me think that maybe if they'd have got the right offer, they would have moved on from him this summer. But thinking about the makeup of that midfield, you talked about Donny van der Beek, you talk about Paul Pogba, you talk about Bruno Fernandes. Someone else is probably not that clean when Ronaldo's come in, by the way, despite what he'll tell you.
He's got 10 penalties a season, isn't he?
He's going to shrink to this big. But when you've got that much quality, obviously they see each other in training, but then they know in the game that they can't work it out. So they always have to drag in this extra cart horse, whether it's Fred, whether it's Nemanja Matic. I mean,
no football player should be called Fred.
But I mean, when Ollie said to them, we need a defensive midfielder, and they're like, we're buying Ronaldo, and he was like, okay, what does he do next? I mean, what is his next plan? Because it doesn't really look like they've got anything in mind. I mean, obviously,
It's just whatever's going with them, isn't it? It just seems it's like it's dead scattergun. There doesn't seem to be like a joined up process behind what they're doing. And Woodward's getting off as well, I think, isn't he? Ferguson's still got his fingers in the pie, it seems like. Solskjaer's there and just doesn't have the gravitas of a top 3 manager. You brought Ronaldo on, he's a bigger ego and a bigger figure in football than Solskjaer is. Solskjaer was cringy as fuck when he was talking about Ronaldo and some game against Wolves years ago or whatever. It's just like, what are you on about?
Turn it in.
Yeah, just shut up. So it feels to me like an accident waiting to happen, all of it. Like, I get that if you're a Man United fan, of course you're delighted that, we bought Sancho and we bought Ronaldo and great. But it feels very football manager, it feels very, and even the discussions around, well, Ronaldo will bring in all this money. Yeah, for himself. Yeah. He's got his own brand, CR7, do you know what I mean? It's not...
So he's even got number 7 as well. He's had the number 7 shirt off Cavani.
Yeah.
Says enough, doesn't it?
And that's another one, isn't it? And it's like, well, hang on, don't I count anymore? Yeah. So just good luck managing all these people. And as you say, you would imagine, look, of course there are people at Man United, whether it's Solskjaer or not, but people around who've got a football brain who can see this situation in midfield. And of course, as you say, someone said, need to buy in that area, need to improve in that area. Nah, we're getting him and we're getting him, and don't you worry about it. And it's like...
It smacks of, and this is something that Man United, more than most clubs, have been accused of, their priorities are slightly wrong. The ultimate for them is not necessarily winning games of football. And these kinds of decisions bear that out more than anything else. But we'll have to remain and see exactly how badly they will do. I mean, personally, I think it's one of those situations where we're going to see them win games of football. We're going to see Ronaldo score goals. We're going to see things that they're going to be able to claim as a success. But the reality is when it comes to the crunch in the key games, I still believe, and I'm sure we all do here, that they are going to fall short. As for the other two, we're probably going to be battling them for a while yet. Guys, thank you very much. This has been the very first edition of the Top 6. Stick around for the next one.